Hello, welcome to the Bible in Plain Sight. My name is Carol Evans. So, thank you so much for joining me for our next adoption story. This is our third one this month that we have started. And honestly, this is kind of the one that really got it kicked off. So, I think they just joined. So, I'm going to go ahead and. Okay, can you hear me? You should have that invitation there. Okay, Annabelle, let me know if you can. You should have gotten that invitation to connect on here. Okay, you should see that invitation there.
There.
Oh, you got it.
Not very tech savvy.
No, you're good. You're okay. You're totally fine. Awesome. Okay.
Can we get both of us?
Yeah, I can
Okay.
see you. I
Okay.
can see you now. Okay, you're here.
Yes.
We're doing it. We've been talking about this for a couple months, and we were on a double date several months ago, and we were talking about adoption. And so, after our conversation, you guys really gave me the idea to have this whole month to focus on adoption stories. And so, you're the third adoption story that we've had on here. And so, I really just wanted to hear a little bit more about. What you guys shared that night, your heart for adoption, when it all got kicked off for you, and kind of what made you go down this path. Because unlike some of the other stories we've heard, you guys didn't pursue adoption because you couldn't have children through natural childbirth. You pursued adoption just because it was on your heart to do. And so I'd love to hear more about what made you go down that road, and kind of just more about what's on your heart with adoption.
Yeah, well, thank you for talking with us. It's definitely something I feel passionately about.
Hmm.
And that's been something that when we were dating, I think I had always expressed that I wanted to adopt.
Yeah.
I don't I think maybe some of it just came from like reading these stories of Amy Carmichael and her work with children over there, and just I don't know,
Hmm.
these children without families. Um,
Yeah.
the idea just bothered me. So it's something we had always talked about.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
then we didn't know what that was going to look like.
Yeah.
Life happened. We had four bio kids,
Mhm.
and we were really thinking we'd do foster care. We felt
Mhm.
strongly about, you know, being here in the United States and the need that's there.
Yeah.
And then there was an organization that I don't even remember how I was following called Project 143 that
Mhm.
does what they call orphan hosting.
Mm.
And the children can come into your home over summer and winter breaks. And it has, twofold purpose. Like hopefully these families are looking to adopt,
Mhm.
and gives them a great chance to like meet these kids. And they
Yeah.
specialize in kids that are older, over
Yeah.
the age of 6. So they're every year after 5, your chances go down
Mhm.
for being adopted. And it sounds scary, adopting a teenager. And
Yeah.
so they're really focused on older kids,
Mhm.
sibling groups,
Mhm.
which for the Latin American country we were in, that is considered as special needs.
Mm.
Older kids in sibling
Mhm.
groups are considered special needs.
Wow.
Um, so they, so you're either looking to adopt great to know these kids, learn they're not so scary, find out all the things about them. Or you're not planning to adopt, but you can advocate for them. So you
Mm-hmm.
get to experience them in a home setting, which they most of the time they're in a group home,
Yeah.
and if maybe a foster care home, and they um, they can get overlooked. So you can speak into all
Yeah.
the details in their personalities and
Mm-hmm.
nuances, and then it gives them to the ability to see like what living in a family looks like.
Yeah.
Um, so through that, we met our son,
Mm-hmm.
and he was 12 at the
12.
time.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That was in 2019, and we had just finished a house remodel. I got an email about this hosting opportunity. And I said, hey, our house is done. We have the space, we have the resources. Why don't we do this? Not knowing
Yeah.
that all the children from that country were adoptable, like their
Mm.
paperwork's already cleared.
Yeah.
Um, so you go on a photo listing and look at these kids, which is
Mm. That's
awful,
so hard.
It really is. And you hear little things about their
Mm.
personalities, and you're just like told to pick one.
That's
Um,
so hard.
for me, I knew the moment I saw his picture, like that's
Mm-hmm.
my son.
Mm-hmm.
I did not.
No, it was. I was like,
So
hey,
how
we're
long
just
did it take you,
we're
Tim,
just
like to get on board? How
advocating.
long did it take you?
A long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Just a
think that's
little.
normal.
Yeah, just
I
a
think
little
like
bit of the Lord, probably.
yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you started that journey in 2019, and then obviously COVID kind of played a part in the delay of that.
Yes,
So then
COVID,
how did all that work?
paperwork, everything was slowed down.
Mm-hmm.
People were in an office. So that's
Yeah.
frustrating enough. And you're not allowed to have communication during this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just gone back home and they don't know what's happening. So once we had submitted our dossier and all our information, they actually came back with us and said, no, we could not adopt him. We could
Wow.
adopt a different child, maybe a younger child, but not him. It's like he's not replaceable. I don't just
Yeah.
want any child. I'm not just looking to
Yeah.
collect children.
Yeah.
So it was a rough year. I was like, God, I
Mm-hmm.
know. And we appealed
Yeah.
it, and I do not have peace about letting him go.
Mm-hmm.
If there's another better family for him. Um, but he hadn't found a family, and so I just really grieved that year and wrestled
Yeah.
with God about it. And, finally it was at this point, like, I have done everything I can, and you are going
Mm-hmm.
to have to just call me out of like, you're going to have to
Yeah.
work this out.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what happened. A year later,
Mm-hmm.
talking with the organization, I said, he still needs a family. There's one still here. I don't understand. And she said, I'm going to ask about this. And then it was like a call, like, hey, they've had a complete change. We like take the next step. And we just kept getting yeses and yeses. So then 2 years
Wow.
later, in 22, we got to go and bring him home. So
Wow.
home 2 years now.
So he wasn't told anything about like during that time. He didn't know
No,
anything, and
Yeah,
he
no,
there's no.
come to stay with you guys during the summer, though, right?
Christmas,
Or was it over
Christmas
Christmas?
of 2019.
Yeah, that was the only time, though. That was just the first
Yeah.
time. And that was before we were ready for adopting.
Yeah.
We were just hoping. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and you're not
Oh
allowed to
man.
talk to them while they're here that you might
Right.
want to adopt either. So,
Yeah. So he didn't know like he had this great family. He had Christmas with you guys, and then he just went back
yeah.
home.
Exactly.
Man, that's so hard.
Yeah. Yeah, Colombia is very strict on
Yeah.
communication. They don't even let you host 2 times in a row, will
No.
they? Yeah.
Oh wow. No, what about I know a lot of people have concerns about adopting and then with their biological children and what either that relationship will be like or what communication will be like and will the children perceive like a favorite over one or the other? Like how have you guys dealt with that? Because I know that that's had to be hard. That's had to be an
Well, you
adjustment.
just tell them who the favorite is, and life's not fair. No,
Really big.
no, no, don't do that. No, I think we did a Annabelle all during this time. We like changed a lot of things, and one of the things we started doing was family meetings. and we would
Mm-hmm.
discuss all of these things with the children. And
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't on board with the adoption before all of them. And
Yeah.
they had a little meeting and told me they all wanted to adopt. And I was like, well, I'm not ready to adopt. So I need to be part of this. And I think the biggest one was for Weston because he
Mm-hmm.
was our eldest and Emmanuel is older than him. So replacing the
Yeah.
birth order is hard.
Yeah.
And I took him to breakfast one morning and I was just like, how are you feeling with the whole adoption? And he just
Mm-hmm.
told me, and at this point, I was not prepared or ready to adopt either.
Yeah.
And he just told me, he's like, he's like, we may be the people that are supposed to show him Jesus. So I want to adopt him.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big moment for me because it kind of put my perspective, my
Yeah.
perspective was not in the proper place.
Mm-hmm.
And if an 8-year-old boy who's being replaced in a birth order of a family can be there, like
Yeah.
that was a convicting moment for me. So
Yeah.
I feel like that was not really a struggle for us. I mean, there's more struggles with him home now in the fighting, just
Yeah.
normal sibling rivalry, but I don't think there's been a day where any of them have ever thought he shouldn't be their brother or he shouldn't be in our
Mm-hmm.
home. So
Yeah.
I think I would
Yeah.
choose
You
that.
mentioned like the culture difference, like because he's not from America, the other adoption stories we've had, well, one of the other adoption stories was from the US. And so how have you guys tried to learn his culture and help him? How did you integrate him into American culture?
Good. Because he was from a Latin American country,
Hmm.
my mother is Puerto Rican,
Mm,
and so I felt automatically a little bit of a bond to that, a little
yeah.
familiarity, and I know it helped. He's very close to my mom, and that was great too.
Hmm.
That she lives close by, and that was
Yeah.
part of. So I feel like he has some of that there, and we've yeah, I think it's naturally some of it is there. And then we've really
Hmm.
tried to, try to work on our Spanish. We have artwork from Colombia. We try as
Hmm.
much as we can to. It's an interesting thing, though. It's a big concern in international adoptions, and I
Hmm.
value that. Like, I do not want him to
Yeah.
lose that. I
Yeah.
don't want him to lose his
Yeah.
culture. For me, like my mother being Puerto
Yeah.
Rican but being raised in the US, I tend to look Hispanic. I don't speak Spanish.
Hmm.
I know that feeling of kind of that in between sometimes,
Yeah.
where people expect certain things but I can't
Right.
deliver. And so I
Hmm.
I know that that's always going to be a struggle for him.
Hmm.
And so it's important to us that he maintains as much as he can. So we've attending a Spanish speaking
Hmm.
church. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, working on that. And then
Yeah.
he's just inundated with American culture.
Yeah.
We're not a football
Yeah.
family. He's picked up on that. He loves football. Like he's
This is
just
so
takes
funny.
the things, yeah, that have worked for him.
Yeah.
And
Like American football or like
American
soccer?
yeah,
football.
American
Yeah.
football. Wow.
and when
That's
he
pretty
came
funny.
here, we had 3 weeks in Colombia with him, so we got to build some
Yeah.
memories and just learn the culture for those 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But when we came here, everything in America was, wow, Colombia's better, Colombia this, Colombia. And now we've seen a shift where if you mention something about Colombia, he's like, no, America, America.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
so that's where we fear we're like, we don't want him to completely
Right.
disregard his culture and his
It's part of
background.
who he
Yeah,
is. Yeah.
exactly.
A lot of identity battles that,
Hmm.
happen there as an
Yeah.
older adopting with, your
Yeah.
culture and your so.
So practically speaking, what have you all done to try to help him with that and um, that adoption of who he is, and just is it just regular like one-on-one conversations with him, or what have you guys done to try to keep that engagement, keep that conversation going?
Um, you know, it's really led by the child.
Hmm.
Like we have a teenage boy who
Yeah.
doesn't talk a lot about his
Hmm.
feelings, and then
Right.
you have the issue.
Just pretty normal.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So you have
Yeah.
that teenage, and then
Hmm.
combined with trauma, older child adoption.
Hmm.
2 years, we're still working on on bonding and things. So I mean,
Hmm.
therapy was. He has a Spanish speaking counselor. That was
Hmm.
important to us. That we maintain that from the beginning.
Yeah.
And just being open, like again, keep just working on that, on those bonds,
Yeah.
and trying to kind of work through his individual trauma and how that
Hmm.
manifests for him.
Yeah.
With my business too, all the guys that work with me are Hispanic, or a lot of them, and they're
Mm,
just really good
yeah.
guys, and they've all accepted him and love
Hmm.
him, and so he'll have days where he gets to spend with them and just all the Spanish he can
Hmm.
handle, and he always seems to come back a little bit just lighter
Yeah.
after that, and so I think
Yeah.
that's been really helpful for him to know that he has that
Yeah.
uh,
Does do,
relief or whatever to be able
do
to.
him and your mom, Annabelle, do they get to speak Spanish to each other?
Yes, they do. They speak
Oh, that's
only
awesome.
Spanish when they're, yeah. You know, and
Hmm.
us being able to spend those 3 weeks in Colombia, like I knew how
Hmm.
exhausted I was of
Yeah.
just, it's like, I don't even want to go out to dinner because I don't want to have to deal with the translation. I
Yeah.
don't want to have to figure it out. Everything was so much harder. So that really helped to realize that for him coming in. And so
Hmm.
when you have this
Yeah.
too, like you have what they call the honeymoon phase
Hmm.
in adoptions. I don't really feel like we got that. But,
Yeah.
everything is great. Everyone's on their best behavior. And then reality sets in and
Hmm.
homesickness sets in and culture shock sits in
Yeah.
like 6 months after. So
Yeah.
realizing like, yeah, it's great when you can go back home. But when you're
Hmm.
realizing this is my reality and this, it's always going to be my
Yeah.
second language, like that's a lot. It's a lot
Yeah.
to take in.
That's hard. That's really hard. So if someone is thinking about adoption or if they're questioning if, is there really a need? Is this something that, um, what if, with those other countries they're taken care of, they're in an orphanage, everything's good. If less people are exposed to it, I think sometimes there's just a gap in reality and expectation. And so if there's someone that's either considering it or praying about it and they just think maybe I'm not a good enough parent, or maybe my home isn't nice enough, or maybe whatever, like what are some things you would tell people if they're interested in adoption but maybe are scared to kind of dip their toes in?
I
Yeah.
think I think for me, I think this adoption journey too is, if you let it, it can be like the biggest grow up moment in your life, because you
Mm-hmm.
have to face all of these things that you can hide because it's easy.
Mm,
But in adoption, like you're opening all of that up, and you
yeah.
don't walk in thinking, "Wow, I've got this figured out." Like you realize, I don't have anything figured out. And I think it
Yeah.
opens you up to living by faith more, and realizing as
Mm,
Christians, like, one, it's our duty, as a Christian, to love those
yeah.
in their pain, in their hurt, not the perfect,
Mhm.
part of them, but
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and two, open your home to that, because who else
Yeah.
is more prepared or equipped to do that? If we as
Hmm.
Christians aren't, who else can do that? And
Yeah.
as you do that, I think you realize, how much little and how much more the Lord, needs to be real in your life, and let Him work through you. And that's an amazing thing to know that He's doing, even though
Hmm.
in the midst of it you don't feel good about it, but
Yeah.
you see it working, and that's how.
Hmm.
That's what I would encourage people. And don't ever feel like you're ready for it, because you won't ever be ready for it.
Yeah.
Just obey, and
Yeah.
follow.
Yeah.
It's it, it's hard to explain to non-believers, but it's still hard to even explain to believers like that the
Hmm.
calling that you feel like this
Hmm.
logistically, financially,
Yeah.
like everything does not make sense. This is, and then people ask like, why did you choose to adopt? And it's like I don't really have a good answer. And what
Hmm.
answer is there? Like it's
Hmm.
such a complicated issue with adoption, and you can't
Hmm.
like love isn't enough to fix.
Yeah.
There's traumas. You are
Right.
walking into brokenness. Like I've been read Anne Voskamp's book Waymaker, which kind of
Hmm.
goes through her journey of
Hmm.
adoption, and so she speaks a lot about it. But you're like walking into this covenant of this contract of like stepping into this brokenness and this suffering that has
Hmm.
happened because like this adoption isn't what's intended. This isn't the ideal,
Yeah.
ideally. And I've told him this, like, I would have loved if you could have stayed with your family. Like,
Hmm.
I know like you were always going to carry some of that you're always going to carry that
Yeah.
with you, because
Yeah.
that's not how it was intended to be.
And know that that is God's original plan. Like
Yeah.
we want that for you, but it didn't happen.
Hmm.
So this is where we're at now. But
Yeah.
walking with them in that and allowing them to feel that is so
Yeah.
important. But, sorry.
So I
Yeah.
encourage people just like to really like it's really is a calling. It's really,
Hmm.
discussing with God and being open. We get
Hmm.
frustrated when we hear people just automatically shut off,
Hmm.
adoption. Like, well,
Yeah.
this isn't my calling. My husband's not on board. And I was like,
Hmm.
but are you really?
I wasn't on board.
Are you really praying
I am
about
now.
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
Are you really like really seeking God's face about this? Don't
Hmm.
just write it off
Yeah.
that this season, I understand there's seasons, like don't write off that this is
Yeah.
something you could never do.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
and then it looks like there's a statistics about, and it's actually for US foster care. There's over
Hmm.
400,000 children in US foster care. We have
Hmm.
that many churches
Hmm.
listed, might be slightly lower. So they were talking about how just one church, one Christian
Hmm.
church steps into this foster care. And I mean, this would have to be done. Like, this isn't going to
Yeah.
solve a problem.
Right.
But the statistic,
Perpetual problem.
the statistic was
Yeah.
3% of Christians are fostering. So I
Wow.
can't even
Wow.
imagine
Three? You said three?
3%,
3%?
3%,
Wow.
and 30 something percent is considered it. So I mean, we're just talking about fostering, like not
Yeah.
even
Adoption.
international adoptions,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so
Wow.
you don't have to be called to
Mm.
adopt internationally or otherwise. And I was talking, like, researching this. I was like,
Mm.
the ideal would be to get these families to stay together.
Yeah.
And it is such a
Yeah.
complicated issue. So orphans, there's two definitions of that, where you have, orphan where one parent or both parents are deceased. And then we also have what we call
Mm.
social orphans, which would be our son's
Mm.
case, where just parental care wasn't done well. There's
Mm.
neglect, some
Mm.
abuse. So
Mm.
it's like here, they'd be pulled into the system. So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
that kind of misconception of what orphan really
Mm.
is.
Yeah.
But,
Mm.
we're like, so ideally the family, but in some countries that's, a lack of finances. There's
Right.
Ann Voskamp's daughter, there's
Mm-hmm.
major heart issues. They can't afford the surgeries. They can't afford the help.
Mm.
So really looking at how we, support international adoption
Mm.
costs $40,000 easily. What if we're what if we're giving a small percentage instead of adopting, like, into
Yeah.
these organizations that are going to help these
Yeah.
families stay together?
Mm.
Or even we had it through the same organization. We have a young boy from Ukraine that had come and stayed with us.
Mm.
And for Ukraine, he could come twice. He
Mm.
wasn't, paperwork wasn't able to be adopted,
Mm.
but we've stepped into this mentorship role with him, and
Mm.
we're able to go visit him when he had been moved out of
Mm.
Ukraine. And
Mm.
so even if it's not actual adoption, and that,
Yeah.
again, very
Yeah.
complicated, where some of these teenagers, even in foster care, maybe don't want to be adopted. But like
Mm-hmm.
the thought of these older kids having to step out
Yeah.
on their own and start life without anyone to fall back on, without any kind of support system,
Yeah.
just really bothers me. So, thinking again,
Yeah.
rethinking, like, teenagers are not as scary as you think.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just looking broad and beyond, an infant adoption too. I
Yeah.
feel very strongly about, because there's
Yeah.
its own trauma we're finding involved even with that, and prenatal, and so
Yeah.
yeah, really talking to the Lord and considering and being open.
Yeah. Yeah. So what is next for you all in the adoption journey? Do you feel like your family is complete? Are you praying about adopting more? Like, what's next for you all?
Yeah, so we had a set of sisters come stay with us this
Mm.
past summer, and we are now in the process to hopefully bring them home.
Oh,
We still
wow.
haven't submitted our dossier. We could still be
Mm.
denied. We're not really sure.
Yeah.
So, and then this case, I
Wow.
was rethinking that would bring us to 7 children, and we're pretty busy already. I'm like, again, this makes no logistical sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
am
Yeah.
I crazy? Can I parent this well? And it brings up a lot of doubts for me. And then on this side,
Yeah.
he's the one that's like, come on, let's go get
Yeah,
it.
I'm ready.
Like, we can do this. Um,
Yeah, I mean, seven, that's like a big change in like vehicles, and you got to drive two cars or like get a 15 passenger van. Like you're one of those families at this
yes.
point. Like that's
Yeah.
kind of where you
We
are.
already did it. We just added 2 more bikes to the camper, so we're ready.
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. So, with that, I mean, you just dropped a pretty big price tag with international adoption. And I mean, that's it. Sisters is a big deal. And not just the responsibility of it and not just the extra laundry of it, but
Yeah.
just the cost and the commitment to that. And so, um, what have you all done to try to, have you like had like fundraisers to raise funds for it, or what have you just saved and try to pray about it, or what have you done to try to raise the money for that?
Yeah. Our first time around, we did fundraisers. That was kind of
Hmm.
unexpected. We just,
Yeah.
yeah, just doors
Plus, I
open.
didn't have a lot of faith on the first round. So I was like,
And
I
we,
like to be in control, and
yes.
Yeah,
knowing that
I
God is going to
understand.
be in control makes me nervous, I guess. So
Hmm.
um,
Yeah, I think all of makes all of us nervous. Yeah.
I didn't want to fundraise this time. I want to just see God work.
Hmm.
And it was amazing to watch him work with Emmanuel after I finally did submit. And
Hmm.
one of the most amazing stories, I was so worried about when we had to be in Colombia for 3 weeks, and I was so worried about
That was the
cost.
minimum. We didn't know how long we would actually end up being in country.
Yeah, you don't know.
Hmm.
So the cost is you have to have an apartment while remaining all of your costs here in the States. And we had
Yeah.
four kids here, and so I was so worried because we just didn't know what that was cost. So I was just putting everything on a credit card, and I was so worried, and I was having a panic attack, and I was like, what is going to happen?
Yeah.
Well, about 2.5 weeks in, a buddy calls, just a good friend, and he's like, hey, we were praying for you this morning, and really my wife wanted it, but we are going to give you guys a check for X amount.
Wow.
And I was like, oh man, thank you. That helped me, so
Yeah.
much. And I'm still like, how much is me? Well, we get to the end and we're adding up receipts and heading to the airport. I was like, would you believe it? Like our in-house cost was within $100 of what they gave us. And
Wow.
so I don't know. It just really taught me that it doesn't really matter how
Yeah.
much planning I do, how much worrying. If
Hmm.
this is what God has for us, He's got the right
Yeah.
people in place that are praying and that He
Hmm.
can speak to, and
Yeah.
He's going to take care of that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So we've been able to handle this on our own the second time
Hmm.
around. But I'd encourage like your churches again, those numbers,
Yeah.
like if you have most likely not more than one family is adopting,
Hmm.
especially at a time.
Yeah.
Like in most congregations, like I don't understand why a church cannot help fund a
Yeah.
good portion of one. I mean, there's so many grants available
Yeah.
too. The way we're
Yeah.
self-employed, they don't usually apply to us,
Hmm.
but for other people. But still, like, come on, like
Yeah.
like I'm think
Yeah.
there's no, even I said one day I calculated this fund we needed. I was like, just between our Facebook friends, I was like, you can't overlook too what just small amounts. Like if everyone
Yeah.
just donated $25,
Yeah.
what this would do.
Yeah.
yeah,
And like
Hmm.
there are so many families, we know
Hmm.
personally are going into debt over this. Their
Yeah.
credit cards are. I mean, that is
Yeah.
that's insane.
Yeah.
yeah,
No family
It is
have to.
insane.
I mean, already when they come home, you're paying for therapies.
Hmm.
You're stressed out.
Yeah.
You're adding another
Right.
child. To go into
Yeah.
that is just ludicrous.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It is. And especially when you see um how we choose to spend our money,
yeah,
yeah,
and the stuff we spend it on. And then when it's like, oh, but I can't afford to like help someone with an adoption, or I can't afford to do this. And it's like, well, you can. You just spend it on what it's like 24 ever. All of us have 24 hours in a day. And we all decide how we spend it. And we all get a paycheck. And they might vary on the amount of the paycheck, but we all decide how we get to spend it. And so, yeah, that's pretty unbelievable.
yeah.
That's pretty unbelievable. So if someone is considering it, would you mind if they reach out to me? I know you're not on Instagram very much, so thank you for hopping on tonight because Instagram's not really your thing, but thank you for doing this. If they reach out and they're interested in learning more about adoption, or what was the organization called again that you all started with?
Project 143.
Project
Kids Safe
143. Okay.
is another one.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'd be
Okay.
happy to talk to
And
anyone.
Okay.
cost, what is it? How much was it to get them here for?
You pay for your donation is paying for their plane ticket, their hosting
Hmm.
experience, and it was about $3,500. Again, there's
Yeah.
grants for
Yeah.
that, and it's a great way too to again meet older kids and see how that works in the dynamic of your family. We did have
Yeah.
one boy that were like, this, I don't know if we're ready for this
Hmm.
right now. Like it's just the dynamic
Sure.
a lot, and
Hmm.
so yeah, I
Yeah.
and when you have a face like and a personality to a child, it's really
Oh man.
no, it's hard to
Yeah.
Yeah.
like.
I know that's been a big thing I've heard from different people is they're just so worried about getting attached. And well, what if I get attached and it doesn't work out? What if I get attached and it hurts my heart? Or what if I get attached and I think it's not what if, it's all of those things are going to happen.
Right.
Like you're going to get attached and you're going to be hurt.
Mhm.
But it's like, well, if you're not hurt, then they don't ever see that. And just like Tim, just like you were talking about with that breakfast with your son is it my hurt I'm worried about, or is it, exposing them to Christianity and showing the love of Jesus to them and being the hands and feet of Jesus to them? And we have an opportunity, we have a chance to make a difference in a child's life.
And
And
if you have children in your home, you
mhm,
know, the Bible tells us to train our children, and
mm,
training and teaching are two very different things. We can tell our children
yeah,
all day long to love the unlovable,
yeah,
but when we show them what that looks like, it's
yeah,
not just, it's not just for the orphan. It's not just for this
mm,
parentless child. This is for your children.
mm-hmm,
Do you want your children to know how to
mm,
love the unlovable and know what God's love looks like to them? And I
yeah,
can't think of a better way to model that than,
mm,
hosting or adoption. I mean,
yeah,
such an amazing thing for your children.
yeah. Absolutely. Well, we were talking about this months ago on a double date night. We were talking about foster care. We were talking about all the stats. Do you have the stats of teenage kids that are either in foster care or being adopted? Do you know how many are actually teenagers that don't get adopted that actually end up like aging out of the
And
system?
I was trying to like shore up my statistics.
A lot have been added because of all the wars right now. So the
I know.
statistics.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. And I'm sure it's more. I just didn't know
So
how much more.
orphans alone. So Project 143 started because 143 was 143 million orphans, they
Mm,
say. It's increased, they think around 150. And again,
mm,
it's that, one parent or both parents,
yeah.
social orphans. Um, and then, but there are the statistics for the amount, what happens to the amount of children who age out, like
Mm,
how many are committing suicide. And
mm.
I had it on my phone. I meant to write it down. I can't
Oh
pull it
no,
up.
you're good.
Um,
You're good.
suicide, trafficking,
Yeah.
these kids. And yeah, just
So
Mm,
internationally, orphanages a lot of times, like the boy in Ukraine that we are talking with, a lot of times around 15, 16, there's no more care. They're put back out on
age
the
out.
street. They age out, and that's where I
so
think
what
the
happens when
statistic.
they age out? They just have to move out of the orphanage?
Right? Yeah.
They're independent.
There,
So
some of them, if they're smarter, they might be able to get into another education program or something. But a lot
trade.
of them are left homeless, and that's where
Mm,
these statistics are rising for these teenage children who are being trafficked or suicidal. And
yeah.
like, I think the statistic, if I'm right, is like 21% make it to adulthood
Yeah.
after aging
Mm,
out.
mm,
And so again, people ask, oh, why would you consider it international? Well, that's a really good reason.
yeah.
Not that American orphans are any worse, but there's a lot more programs in place
Mm,
and
mm,
probably a safer environment here
mm-hmm.
for them than these international orphans. And I think
Yeah.
that's something to be considered.
Mm, wow. Well, thank you guys for sharing your story. I know it is evening and you've had a long day with a house full and jobs and everything else and school. So thank you for taking the time just to share your heart and to learn more about it. And so, anyway, I appreciate that. I really have just been hoping and praying that the right people would see this and would either be burdened to move forward with adoption or with foster care or be burdened to help fund yours if doing their own isn't something that they feel like God has put on their heart, but to be able to fund somebody else's. And so, anyway, thank you guys for sharing your heart. And if anyone reaches out, I will make sure to give them your contact information.
Thank you for spreading the
Awesome.
word and
Yeah.
making it a
Yeah.
priority.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Love you guys. We'll see you soon.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.